Hey everyone, I'm Michael Halley. I'm running for mayor because I love Fairfield. This is my 10th consecutive year on the city council, and some other leadership positions I've held were the president of the Chamber of Commerce Board, Visitors Bureau Board, and Volunteer Center Board. I'm an active volunteer. I'm always looking for opportunities to serve. About 12 years ago, I took a kind of a shift in my life and decided to devote myself to service to others. And city council and mayor is part of that for me. So some of the focuses, the priorities that I've named for my first term, assuming I win, is we got to deal with workforce development. So that really involves attracting and retaining working age citizens here in Fairfield. Also, housing is a real issue, and it's actually tied with that. And so we got to increase affordable, quality housing options, especially rentals. We also got to fix our streets. A lot of that work is already planned, but we're going to increase the number of streets that we're going to repair in the next coming years. We're going to take out some money to do so, but also making the streets not just safe for vehicles, but also for pedestrians, cyclists, and disabled people. So trying to create kind of a complete streets approach. Fiscal responsibility is important to me, and I think the citizens of Fairfield are really glad that the city has gotten our bond rating back up and built up cash reserves and really become almost as efficient, I don't want to say as possible, but definitely more efficient than we've been in the 10 years I've been on the city council. And I feel that the citizens want us to be responsible stewards of taxpayer money and continue that forward into the future. So a lot of that's about creating a culture of fiscal responsibility where the city is just that way. We don't act that way when the mayor or administrator makes that a priority. It's just ingrained in our culture. And something that hits me in my heart is the idea that in our community that there are children and elderly who don't have food to eat, don't have all the food that they need all the time. So that's called food insecurity, and it just breaks my heart to consider that anybody in our culture of abundance, the food is there, but the economics aren't supporting them getting that food. And the city doesn't have money to do work on that necessarily. We're not geared towards that. That's really federal and state and county. But the mayor can bring attention to these kind of issues. And I feel, and I think a lot of people in this community agree, these issues need to be addressed. Because a lot of what goes along with food insecurity, extreme poverty, is undiagnosed mental health issues, and that plays into drug addiction. So it's all of the things that we don't like to consider that we have issues with here in Fairfield, but we're just like every small town in the United States, in the Midwest, in Iowa. We have these issues, and if we don't deal with them, we're kind of sweeping them under the rug, so to speak, and a lot of these things are hidden from view. Most of us don't know people who have food insecurity issues. Most people who have them won't come out and tell you that. It's embarrassing to them. So those have been my main focuses, though I know from when I got on the city council, initially got on in 2010 and ran because I wanted to help the Go Green plan become a reality. So that was really my main focus of running at that time. But what I discovered when I got on the council is there are always new problems to be solved and new issues to be addressed, and there's just no end to it. You can just work forever, continually trying to improve the situation for people. So that's it in a nutshell. For these last 10 years, I've been having conversations with people. I try to keep myself open and available and accessible. And I've been told I'm really good at responding when people have a communication with some sort of issue, that I'll return their call quickly or respond to their email. And that is really important to me. Actually, in 2013, I asked the city council's permission to make the city's Facebook page for the very reason of communicating more between the government and the citizens we serve. because when decisions are made and people have no idea about the process, they feel left out, and it can almost feel kind of victimized in it. Like, well, when did this decision get made, and why didn't I have a say? So I've worked to increase transparency so that everyone knows what's happening before it's decided, so that anybody who wants to speak up gets their opportunity. And that's really, really important to me. And so I've worked also to be that kind of elected official representative. I try to set my personal feelings aside and just address the issues based on the consensus of what the most of the people who I represent want, with a little twinge of there is always going to be a personal aspect to what I feel is best, but I always try to be a good representative. So what are some concerns that you guys have?
I got a question.
Yes, you in the corner.
So, as a private citizen, I'm not really involved in politics other than, it affects me every day, obviously. But I don't really know what the mayor does. And it seems to me like some of the other candidates don't know what the mayor does either. I have a feeling you do. Could you explain what the mayor's role is in terms of the city, the council?
Yes. So it is very confusing for a lot of people. The mayor is almost entirely a symbolic role. So the mayor is the chief executive officer for the city. So the mayor does sign laws, you could say. If the city, votes on something, the mayor's signature kind of ratifies that. So that is important. I've talked to Mayor Malloy about it. He says it's about 15 minutes a week to sign all the documents. So it's a pretty small part of the job. On the council, the mayor has no vote, not even a tie-breaking vote. So there are 7 council members, but any given meeting, you never know how many you're going to get. So I've been at meetings where it was 6 council members had shown up, and the vote was 3-3. The mayor does not break the tie, and a 3-3 measure is a fail. So if it's not a majority, it's counted as a failure. The mayor chairs those meetings, and I've done that twice as mayor pro tem these last 2 years. First time, I was very nervous. Second time, it really felt much more natural. I've chaired a lot of meetings in the nonprofits that I mentioned earlier. And so it's just a matter of keeping the meeting moving and allowing people their chance to speak, but also encourage them to wrap it up if they're going over time. So a lot of that's just basic Robert's rules type of stuff, just keeping a meeting organized and keeping it moving forward. And I've always been big on consensus building, and Mayor Malloy is an expert at that, and that's something I want to continue to do that he's done, is always ensure that everyone's voice is heard and that we come to an agreement as much as possible. So in my 10 years in council, very few votes have been close. For the most part, most of us are voting pretty much together after discussing it and agreeing on what's the best action. But yeah, when I've heard some of the things other candidates have said about changing zoning laws, mayor can't do that, or lowering property taxes, the mayor can't do that either. Those are things that the council will vote on. I've also witnessed when the mayor and the council are not in alignment, and the council is the authority in terms of what ordinances or laws get passed, or what actions the city does or does not take. So a mayor who's out of step with the council is, it's the description of this type of government we have. It's called a weak mayor. That's the actual description of the type of city government that most cities in the state have. And a very weak mayor is one who doesn't even work well with the council. And it's happened in other places. I don't think it's happened here in Fairfield, and definitely not with Mayor Malloy. He's always been really in tune with the council. But I've seen the council vote in its own way, and that just happens. And so for me, being the longest serving council member on the council and the mayor pro tem who fills in when the mayor is gone, this would be an interesting transition, not to have my vote any longer, but instead to be in a kind of symbolic role. And I acknowledge that is kind of almost giving up some political authority. But at the same time, what I want to do is be more community involved. And that's what I was saying earlier. The mayor is kind of the symbolic representation of the city, but also the community. So, you know, when you have dignitaries come to town, that kind of thing, you know, the mayor will meet them, or if there's a groundbreaking or ribbon cutting, the mayor's there, or sometimes the mayor will come speak to the school children. And so there is that more kind of being a symbolic leader of the community, which is important, but what I'm talking about is actual doing work and getting involved in other agencies that the city government doesn't have any sway over politically or no authority, like the school system. The city cannot tell the schools what to do in any capacity. Can't tell them what food to serve their children, can't tell them what kind of classes. They have their own authority, they have their own elected body and their own taxing authority. The city is separate from that. But can we work together? Absolutely. So that's the kind of stuff I would like to see, is the city working together with the county, with the schools, just, you know, with the local health center on the ambulance service, that kind of thing. And just basically pulling everyone together, and we need to do a new strategic plan and pulling everyone together into what do we want to be? What kind of community do we want to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, and how do we get there? So a lot of it is about bringing everyone together and then building that consensus, not just on the city council level, but building that consensus in the community so that we can prioritize, well, what do we want? So that's what I'm really looking forward to doing, is doing a whole new round of strategic planning. And something that has been sorely missed is more inclusivity in that process. I could probably make a list of 30 to 50 people who I call the usual suspects. And they're the people who you see at these events and these kind of things. You know, we're doing a comprehensive plan, and I look down the list of the citizens who are invited to be part of that, and I just call it the usual suspects. They're great people, but they're kind of recycled over and over again when we do these kind of meetings, these kind of focus groups. I would like to shake that up a little bit, get some of the younger generations involved. You know, if we're going to train up the next generation of civic leaders, they have to start getting involved. They have to start learning what's possible and what's not as much possible, and focusing in on, well, how can I plug in? And I've found that young people, contrary to what some older people say, are not lazy and are not disengaged. They just need to be inspired. And when they're inspired and when you invite them in, they'll give their input and they'll work hard. And so I really want to see that next generation come up, your generation, you know, come up and start helping to do some of the work and have input. So when we're talking about, say, what amenities does the city need? It's not only the people who have accumulated wealth who get to say what amenities we have. It's everybody, so that we actually build towards an inclusive culture.
Awesome.
So I went on a tangent, but
thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another hard question for you.
I love hard questions.
Okay, so there are two other candidates running for mayor, Connie Boyer and Ed Noyes.
Mm-hmm.
Why Michael Halley?
Why Michael Halley?
How do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah, I'm the youngest of the three, right? But I've also had the most experience in city government, and a combination of city government and, I would just say, community activism. And really, when you think about the mayor position, one way to think about it is applying for a job. And so any job has certain requirements, like minimal requirements, and then they have the skills that you want to see, et cetera, et cetera. So as a candidate, I feel like I have the strongest resume in terms of having done work with the city, and doing it for 10 years straight means something. And I think that people need to understand that what happened 5 years ago in city government, that so much has happened since then, that there's a story that's been going, and different trends and different challenges and different solutions that we've formed, and in a sense, I'm not necessarily a change agent. You know, a lot of what I've been talking about is continuing the good work that we've been doing, but in another sense, I'm not a status quo guy either. And so I don't want to be Ed Malloy Jr. I'm not trying to just replicate the last 18 years. You know, I love Ed. He's been like a father figure in many ways, but I don't think the city can afford 18 more years of that level of expansionism. So we've grown our amenities to the point where living in Fairfield is the equivalent of living in kind of an expensive apartment place that has like the hot tubs available to you and the exercise room. Like, we've added all the amenities, and now we're paying for them with our property taxes, and people complain about the property taxes, but that's the funds that support those amenities. So I would like to just see us slow down on the expansionism of these expensive amenities and focus instead on some of the essentials, like we were talking about earlier. You know, the hierarchy of needs. Let's make sure everyone's fed. Let's make sure everyone's living in a safe environment before we just start talking about building the next big multi-million-dollar thing. So I believe, and again, this is a very personal perspective, but from my perspective and from the perspective of people that I've talked with, I feel more tapped into the kind of the unspoken voices in the community than the other two candidates. And so that's why I'm talking about some of these things that haven't been talked about before. And there seems to be, whenever you have a transition like this, there seems to be this tension when there's these issues that aren't being addressed. Mm-hmm. And there's this group that wants to see that happen. And I feel that right now. And my concern is if either of the other two candidates were to get the position of mayor, they wouldn't really be addressed. They'd be kind of given lip service, but not real work. And so, you know, 18 years ago when Ed won, the tension that was building was Fairfield wanting to be more than it was before, wanting to be a great place in this designation that we got in 2006, mm-hmm. and the funds that came with it, and wanting to expand and have more amenities. That was the tension back then. That was pre-recession. That was a different generation that was experiencing things very differently than the millennials, for example, who aren't experiencing that same kind of abundance of wealth. You know, it was difficult for a lot of them to find jobs, and they're not looking for places just to spend their money. And you gotta address that. And so I really feel like I am that bridge. You know, I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm between the baby boomers and the millennials. I'm not either one. I love them both. I don't like the way they fight and name call. I've seen a lot of that going around. I'd like to bring them together, say, what do you love about Fairfield? What do you love about Fairfield? Let's work on those things together. So I feel like I am the candidate who can bridge that divide between the generations, between the university and the townspeople. You know, I'm a second generation meditator, but also I'm a Midwesterner, and I feel like I understand everyone's perspectives, and we just love to see more collaboration between the university and the city and the community. You know, and just kind of was talking to somebody, and they said, I don't think I've ever been inside the domes. And I said, we should just have an open, you know, they should every few months open it up to town people, like, come on in, see what's going on, you know, take a look around. There was somebody who actually had lived here most of their life and said, I've never stepped foot on campus. I said, really? Not once? You never just took a Sunday drive? So there's this weird other, you know, I don't want to go there type feeling sometimes, that I would just like to bridge that as well. And I've talked about bridging the gap also between, you know, I have friends and people I know who are very affluent and are looking for opportunities to give back. Mm-hmm. And then there are people I know who aren't so much, and just to get all of us on the same page as much as possible. So I want to be a unifier, and I want to be the guy who talks about the things that haven't been talked about. And so I'm not hearing some of these things from the other candidates. I'm hearing a lot of the same stuff from what I've seen, and it's again, it's that so common in politics. You know, the people who are doing well and have more than they need, a lot of times fancy themselves as the leaders of the community, but it doesn't have to be that way. You know, they can be leaders, but what about the voiceless people? You know, what about the people who don't have status? Why are we ignoring them? And I don't like that. I want to make it inclusive. You know, I want to give voice to the people who don't normally have a voice and invite them to the table. So that's why Michael Halley.
That's right. I like it. Yeah.
Anybody else got anything?
Sean, I knew you got to ask.
Yeah, I have a question. So you mentioned about getting younger generation involved, right?
Could you say that again?
So you mentioned about getting younger generation involved. How, at like, what could be the first thing that you would expect younger generation to do? Is it attending meetings, or what is it?
Yep, great question. And you got it right. The first thing is to get them to speak up. And so I've been very involved with the Iowa League of Cities. So Iowa League of Cities is exactly what it sounds like. It's just all the cities basically have membership, and they have staff, and they focus in on city issues. And I attend these events, and what's in a sense kind of relieving is that Fairfield is not the only city, small town in Iowa that has a problem with young people leaving, right? Raised there, they grew up there, and go to college and never come back. And so some things that other communities have found valuable could work here. And one idea is, and this was true with the Young Professionals, it's the group that I helped them formalize their group into a real nonprofit back in 2012. And in a sense, it's a welcome wagon. But what's important about it is that it's only for that age group. So it's 18 to 40. I graduated a few years back, I turned 41, and so I don't want to go there when I'm not in that group, because that is more conducive. When you have a kind of a specialized group where it's just your generation, sometimes it's easier for people to express their thoughts and ideas. Sometimes when younger people come to a group and they feel outnumbered, they clam up. You know, they don't feel like, wow, if everyone's going to think of what I say is stupid. You know, I'm just going to sit here and not talk. So the way this one town did it, and I would like to use that model, is you invite young people sometime in the evening, you make it an interesting venue, so someplace kind of cool, and you offer free drinks and free food. And that tends to work, apparently. You know, you actually get a group. And you have a non-judgmental atmosphere, right? We're just going to talk. We're not going to be stodgy about it.
Right.
So it is a lot about inviting them to a process that, in a sense, they haven't been invited to as much before. So that can be, you know, you kind of work them, get them a little bit comfortable, maybe hone in on a few topics that they want to address, and then you bring them into the larger group, and now they've got a little bit more confidence, and now they're going to speak. I got to practice this. I went and spoke to the president of a local manufacturer, one of our big ones, and he was impressed about this concept, so he let me do a little lunch and learn with about 8 employees, and that was where I got to kind of bounce ideas, and we just did it really relaxed, conversational. They did most of the talking, I mostly asked questions, and it was very, in a sense, reassuring to know, like, the housing issue. I heard some stories, and it was, you know, yes, I'm on the right track. This is something that needs to be addressed. And the job situation, and, you know, some people, if they move to town, their spouse can't find work. There are people who are working here in Fairfield and commuting over an hour twice a day, 2-hour drive, 5 days a week. And that's because they either can't find a good place to live or their spouse can't find work here as well. Now these are big issues, they're not easily solved. But what are some smaller issues? I'll give an example of something that I represent the downtown district as part of my ward that I represent. And I've been asked from the moment I got on city council in 2010 to get some tables on Central Park. And so finally, I kind of built up the courage and felt like I had the goodwill to bring that to the council years back. And it got voted down. And it was really kind of surprising. And the way it happened was unfortunate. Just, I wasn't as prepared and as I would have liked to have been. But it got voted down. And I just felt like that was a signal, in a sense, to young people. Like, what you ask for doesn't matter. You don't have a voice. We're not going to change for you. There was this kind of subtext to that no vote. This idea that the town needs to somehow be a living museum, that it has to be the way that people remember it. That's a dangerous thought, because if you don't innovate and if you don't make those little changes that younger people want, you do send them the signal that, you're not really, I don't want to say you're not welcome, but we're not embracing you and your wants. We're just gonna brush you off. I will say within a year, the Park and Rec Board decided to put some tables out. So there are tables on Central Park, and the people who were against it seemed to be okay living with it. So it did eventually happen, but it really struck me as an example of kind of an older council not really listening to the wants of the younger generation, and it's not catering to young people, right? It's not excluding other groups and only listening to. It's being inclusive. Inclusivity means everybody gets a seat at the table. And if people are worried their seat's going to be taken by someone younger, it's not the case. We'll just make the table bigger. So everyone can, have their voice, but we're going to be inclusive, and we're going to be strategically inclusive on purpose, because it's what's needed. That's how you grow your working age population, is you do it strategically. Des Moines is an example of that. They were 10, 15 years ago, they were not a place that young people wanted to be at all. And they had a huge strategic session. They brought in an outside guy, and they put all these projects into place. And some of them were housing, and some of them were adding amenities, like a trail along the bridge and improving their downtown, things that we've done. And they linked them all together. No one project can move forward unless they all move forward. And so the people who had funding for their projects helped the people who didn't, and they all happened. And now Des Moines is considered top 5 places in this country for young people, which just is mind-blowing. And that did not just happen. And it didn't happen because they said, let's just make the town better, right? They made it intentionally a place where working age people would want to live. And now we're losing citizens from Fairfield to Des Moines because there are job opportunities there, there's a lot of amenities, and there are more being added all the time. And so can we do what they did on a smaller level? I believe we can. It starts with talking to everyone in the community and getting more ideas from more people. And so our strategic plan will expire in 2020. It was an 18-year plan from 2002 that ran to 2020. It's time for a new one. It's time to listen to the citizens who we have now and decide what kind of community we want to be moving forward. So yes, you're right. It starts with asking people to come to meetings, asking them to provide input. You could do that also online. We need input. You need data. You need to listen and hear what people are, what they're wanting, and then you strategically work towards those things.
Thank you. Thank you.
At a recent manufacturer appreciation luncheon, near the end, a professor from MUM stood up and asked the audience, and this is the audience of all these manufacturers in Fairfield, said, how many of you have hired an MUM graduate? And no one raised their hand. It just wasn't done. And then he just said, please do, or please consider and talk to me for more information. And it was striking to know that we have an Institute of Higher Education. We also have a satellite for Indian Hills Community College, but we have this university, and they're putting out computer programming majors, and they're putting out hello. They're putting out some very high-level graduates, and they're not finding jobs locally, and that is one of those gaps that I would want to fill as mayor. I attended MUM for 2 years. I experienced that lifestyle, and so to me, the university is not this other entity that's in some way separate from the town. Though I've realized more and more as I've been on the city council and such that it is in a sense separate, and it's not. Doesn't need to be that way. We can really kind of break down those barriers and utilize the university even more. There are some professors who have started working with the city and did some work on behalf of the city that was really valuable. Kind of looking at our Go Green plan and saying what can be the next level of that. And so more of that, absolutely more of that. It would be wonderful to have more collaboration between the university and the community, and between the employers and the programs that are producing these high quality potential employees.
Good.
So for the past 10 years, I've been working for you on the city council, trying to make Fairfield a better place, an even better place for everyone. I want your vote for mayor so I can take that to another level. Inclusive government, strategic planning for the future, and just bringing everyone's ideas to the table so we can make Fairfield even greater than it's ever been, looking 10 years in the future, 20 years, 30 years. It's time to let the next generation step up, so I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So I love what you were talking about with food insecurity. So we moved from Loudoun County, Virginia, which is the richest county in the United States. And one of the reasons why we moved to Fairfield a year ago is because we wanted to be in a slower pace of life. And when I moved here, one of the things that I noticed was there's a lot of poverty in Fairfield. You don't see that anywhere in the news. In all the research that I did prior to shortlisting Fairfield as one of the 2 places we wanted to live here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, we didn't see that side. We saw what the picture that somebody wanted to present to anybody outside facing in, and we saw the reality of it. And I think the contrast was so huge because we had been around a median income of over $250,000 a year, so when you go from that to Fairfield, it was pretty big. So I love where you're going with really focusing on people. You made that post about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which makes sense. You can't get to those higher states of consciousness and self-actualize unless you have those basic needs covered. So, in the spirit of all of that, what are some specific things that you're thinking about doing to move the agenda forward and close the gap when it comes specifically to food insecurity?
It's a great question. And to get to your point, there has been a narrative that talks about Fairfield's prosperity only. And that prosperity is real, but obviously it hasn't reached everyone. So a few red flags in the community are that now at the public schools, more than half the kids are on free or reduced lunch. And so that sends a signal, because you have to have proof of income to get on that program. And that's a sign that there are people slipping under the poverty line, and half is a lot. So just a little background, my family when I was younger was poor and did need government assistance, and I never went hungry. And by the time I graduated high school, we were off of that, my mom started working, and so I've seen how a government investment in a family or an individual can help them get out of poverty and then become self-sufficient and repay their debt through their taxes as a productive citizen, so to speak. So when I talk about this kind of thing, that's the goal ultimately, is to help people through a rough time. However, we're not a truly compassionate community if we don't address the basic needs of food, shelter, and safety, that a decent portion of our population aren't having those needs met. And so specifically, the programs exist. We have a great food pantry called the Lord's Cupboard, and I'm meeting with their director next week because I want to hear it straight, but that's one person who will tell you straight up that they're getting more and more requests for food, and so the need is there even more. There's a group called Carry On Bags, and every 2 weeks they pack little food bags that go home with kids, certain kids, on the weekends. That's part of food insecurity, is that instead of looking forward to the weekend, instead of looking forward to Christmas vacation, there are some kids who worry about it because when they come to school, they know they're going to eat at least that lunch. And when they're not in school, they're not sure that they're going to get their meals. And that's just wrong. So Carry On Bags, so these programs exist. And again, I was making the point, the mayor and the city don't have funds available for this kind of thing aside from some local option sales tax grant funds. And so that's one area that I would like to see the city council, when we decide how to allocate those funds, to prioritize more helping to reach those needs. So if the food pantry asks for funds, or if Carry On Bag asks for funds, because they always need them, that our grant program, that we make sure we fund them every year as long as they need it, that we have those funds. It's local option sales tax, and we have this portion that we set aside for these kind of grants. And it's wonderful to do feel-good projects and add amenities, and no one says we have to stop doing those, but we also need to be responsible to the people in our city who are not getting their basic needs met. So that funding is available. And then the other side of it is that the mayor doesn't have a lot of authority within the city. The city council votes on issues. A quorum, or a majority of a quorum, has authority to take action. The mayor has no vote on the council and really doesn't have authority to tell city employees what to do either. So the mayor's position really is more in the community. And that's one thing I've seen that's missing in the dialogue in our community, is addressing those who are in need. So I don't generally advocate for soft approaches like raising awareness, and I don't think that's the end solution, but that is a start where more people need to be talking about this, bringing out the facts, bringing out the trends, so that more people are aware, and other grant programs that are available, the people who are on those boards and make the decision on how those funds are spent need to be aware as well that this is a real issue. So part of it is just talking about it and making it a public dialogue, and then finding the grant funds wherever you can to assist these programs. I served on, let's see if I can get this right, it's a long title, but it's the University of Iowa Department of Public Health Business Leadership Network. And what it was a group of people from around the state, and we were looking at health and wellness issues within communities. And it was very eye-opening, sitting in and going to these different towns and hearing these civic leaders from other communities talk about what was the challenges that those cities faced. And many times it was familiar, and other times it was in a sense of relief to know we don't have those same issues here, like some of the really bad crime, or the gang violence, or heavy drug trafficking. We have those things, but not on a large scale. So a lot of this isn't anything new, but that program, that group has a grant program, and Carry On Bags 1 year got some funding from it, and I think it helped that I was on the board, and Carry On Bags was from Fairfield. So there's more, there are more resources outside the community that can be tapped into as well. I've worked really hard on health and wellness, and that was where I discovered, I was talking with an employee at the county health department, and she used the term food insecurity, and I said, what's that? I mean, this was 5-6 years ago. I had no idea that that was a rampant issue in our city and county. I had no idea. And I think that's very eye-opening when people hear about it for the first time. But getting to your larger point, yes, there's a lot of poverty in our community as well, and you can just drive around town and see that. You know, it's not all that hidden if you really look for it. So raising everyone up is the challenge of government, but we have to try. You know, you get results. The results vary, but you don't get any results if you're not trying. And so I just like to see just more attention and resources where appropriate. And that goes back to the housing as well, is making sure people have safe, affordable housing. Apparently that's an issue, that a lot of people talk about the housing conditions, that the prices are going up, but the quality is not going up. And that's not good. So there are things the city can do to tighten regulations on that. But to your point about food insecurity, it's connecting the programs that exist with the funding that's available, and it's connecting them with funding outside of the community as well, and it's making sure that everybody in the community is aware that these are issues, because there are probably people who want to give to an important cause, and if they knew, I think they'd be willing to help.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stole my question.
Oh, Shakti,
Oh.
all right.
I was like, what kind of activity do you want to keep the new generation,
Yep.
stay? Because most people, when you graduate from
Oh,
high school,
see, the thing is-
people leave,
Yeah, they
but
do.
then
That's the thing. I can't pretend to know
Right.
before you've asked, and that's. I mean, I could answer it that way.
Yeah.
Because I could come up with what I think or what I've heard, you know, but.
Because I lived here for 18 years. I've been here, so I haven't left yet, but it's a good place to raise kids. But most of the people will leave just because there's not much activities or anything going on for college or younger kids except the bar.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a real issue, and that is actually part of the strategic planning effort. Is you first need to take in the input
right.
from the people who are most affected. I think it should go down to the high school level and earlier. We should ask people who are getting ready to graduate and potentially leave forever.
Right.
Well, what would it take to keep you here? What would be an amenity that may make you more interested in staying in Fairfield? And part of that is, a big part of that is, has to be a community effort, because the city itself doesn't offer that much in terms of amenities. We have a library, we have a park and rec department, but most people aren't excited about our police or fire or our water or wastewater. Those are just things that you expect. Those are essential services. But when you do a strategic plan, you pull in the school system and you pull in the private businesses in town, then you're talking. Because now, if there were a strategic plan that said a large number of people, young people in Fairfield, are interested in a certain type of business, there may be entrepreneurs out there who would be willing to give it a go, you know, and create those spaces where people can gather. So I'm not going to pretend that I have the answers. I mean, I've heard a lot of different things from a lot of different people, and but I do know that when you start the process, it starts with asking.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts with listening, collecting input, and then a plan formulates from that, and then the whole community gets involved to make it happen.